Hey guys, I'm at the Massachusetts Equine Affair and I'm here with Jessica Gonzalez, who is the founder of Empowered Equines. So I wanted to have a conversation with Jessica today because she is big into positive reinforcements. That's all she does, right? With the horses at your rescue. She's also worked with Mustangs and just has a really neat background. So yeah, would you mind just, let's start with introducing yourself a little bit and just telling us your horse background. How did you get into horses? Let's start there.
Okay, so I'm Jessica. I run Empowered Equines Rescue. We're a rescue and sanctuary. And I started with horses when I was a kid, like most little girls who love horses. And I started volunteering at a horse rescue. I really found my passion in the rescuing part of things and the sanctuary and rehabbing horses with trauma issues. Yeah. And then I kept going.
When did you have your first horse?
So my first horse was when I was 21. I finally was able to afford my own horse. I was working at the rescue and we had room and I adopted my own horse that had some major trauma issues. She had some real fear issues. She would stay in her stall and she would refuse to leave. And she's the one that kind of drove me to positive reinforcement.
What was that connection? How did you enter that world?
So I had this horse and she was afraid to leave her stall and she would spend her whole day standing in this tiny 12 by 12 stall, and she's a draft horse, and anytime we tried to get her out, we would try with negative reinforcement, with brute force, and we could get her out, but she would break whatever she had to get back in. After trying everything I knew as a natural horsemanship trainer, I really struggled to get her to become confident in herself. And so you could get results, but not with confidence. Is that what I'm hearing you saying? And I could get her out, but she would, whatever she had to break to get back into her stall, she would break, even if it was me. And then one day I just posted online that I was looking for help, and Shauna commented and responded. She said, "Why don't you try clicker training?" And I had said, well, we put a whole bucket of food outside her stall, and every time she'll reach out, grab a bite, and run back in. So why would clicker training work? And I didn't really understand the science yet of how the behavioral science of conditioning and how we're building her confidence in herself. So I just decided to give it a shot, and I tried it a little bit, taught her some targeting, taught her how to lead with the target. Pretty quickly she was doing everything that we had spent 6 months trying to help her learn, and with positive reinforcement we were able to just break through that wall.
Wow. You still have her?
I do still have her. She's 30 years old now, and we're hoping she lasts a good while, but she's taught us a lot. Now she's kind of the old grandma in the barn that teaches all the little kids how to do clicker training. It's too sweet.
Yeah. And for those who don't know, would you mind just sharing a little bit who Shauna is?
So Shauna is one of the leading positive reinforcement trainers
She's very big
US.
in this world.
She was a dolphin trainer at SeaWorld in the 80s. And so she took her knowledge of training dolphins, and when she started working with horses, she said, why aren't we doing all this clicker stuff with horses? And if we can train a dolphin to jump through a hoop with a person sitting on its back or balancing on it, why can't we do that with a horse? So she kind of introduced that with BZ Madden and a lot of the big name show jumpers, helping them overcome problems that they had with their show horses.
Yeah, it is interesting the amount of other species that positive reinforcement is being used with, but when it comes to horses, people are like, oh no.
Yeah, pretty much every species on the planet we train. I mean, if you look at any zoo or marine mammal park or dogs or cats, we only approach it with positive reinforcement because it's safer, it's kinder, generally, and it produces really good results.
And you've now been doing positive reinforcement how long?
For about 14 years.
14 years, wow. And so that's like, when did Shauna start really introducing it to the equine world?
Shauna started, I think, probably in the 90s. She started introducing it, and maybe in the 2000s. I don't want to age Shauna. She might be offended that I gave that timeline away. But yeah, she started introducing it, and certain people who were really confident in their training, who would embrace positive reinforcement because they were like, hey, this is a secret weapon I can use to help my horses be better than all the rest. But it started to really get into the mainstream culture really in the last 10 years. When I came out here 14 years ago, kind of talking about clicker training, people were still very much in the mindset that you don't give horses treats, there's no reward.
Yeah.
The reward is the release. People nowadays, when I come out and I mention it, there are lots of people who know it. Everybody has an opinion, good, bad, or otherwise, but everybody knows what it is.
Yeah.
And that's huge.
Yeah. So going off of that, what are some of the most common misconceptions that someone new to positive reinforcement, or maybe they know that obviously there's food involved, what are some misconceptions that are out there?
So a lot of people are concerned about using food when they're training horses. They think that by using food, the horse will become muggy or invasive or pushy for the food. One thing that I try to explain to my students is that horses are going to do what earns food. If eating it directly out of your treat pouch or knocking you down or getting into your space gets food, then that's what they're going to do. But if you would teach them a safe default behavior like stand still facing forward, and that's kind of what I teach all of our horses as their safe default behavior, then the horses learn that that's their fastest route to food. They're going to do whatever it takes to get the food. So we choose to teach stand facing forward because it's like a sit stay for a dog. You know, we need to teach our horses to not do anything to earn reinforcement so that we can then teach them behaviors and proof and build stimulus control on those behaviors.
So it's the foundation to doing the more exciting stuff.
Yeah,
Really.
exactly. I think one of the other things that people often think is that clicker training is very mechanical, that it's more like programming your horse rather than, and it's all about like an exchange of you do this for me, I do this for you. And it is to a degree, and often at first it feels like that because the horse is very focused on the food in the beginning. But pretty quickly the horse starts conditioning you as that good thing in their life, and they start realizing that it's not just the food, it's the whole puzzle solving. It's that when you're here, we're having fun, and this is yes, it is an interaction and exchange, but it's a positive exchange that feels good and is fun to figure out.
And so with positive reinforcement, you were telling me earlier that you actually have done it with Mustangs. Can you tell me a little bit about that, how you got into Mustangs in the first place, and then what you've done with them?
So I have lots of friends who train with Mustangs with positive reinforcement. I know Patricia from Mustang Camp, and she is a program in New Mexico where they take in hundreds of Mustangs every year and train them with a program that's all positive reinforcement, and they train them to be adopted out to traditional homes. So even though they're using all positive reinforcement, the result is for them to be gentle and safe for a traditional home to work with, whether they know positive training or not. And then I also have friends like Michelle Martia, who's in Florida, and Hannah Christine, who's in Maine, who do Mustang rehab for horses who have been used for Mustang challenges and didn't necessarily succeed with the traditional approach. When traditional or natural horsemanship hasn't really worked for them, or the person they were working with didn't really have the skill to work with a Mustang that they thought they did, then
and that's very common.
So common.
It happens a lot where you see,
Yeah, I think a lot of people think that training a Mustang is like training a domestic horse, and that just doesn't know anything yet. But they're a very different animal. They are truly wild.
And it's very interesting because I think even I thought this before I got Mustangs, that, oh yeah, you're getting a blank slate.
Unfortunately not.
No, you're not. So
and it's not like they're coming right from the wilds to your front door and to your paddock. There's a whole lot of trauma between being captured to landing in your pasture. Even for a very well established horse, that's difficult to uproot their entire lifestyle and change all of that. But to go from a domestic setting to another domestic setting is much easier than total control of everything in your life to total lack of control. And that's where the positive reinforcement really comes in, because it allows a lot more choice and control for the horse. Even if you might be influencing their behavior through positive reinforcement, the horse feels very in control of their training because they're learning how to operate you. You're the puzzle that they have to solve, and they're already masters of it because they're Mustangs.
Yeah. And so you went to Mustang Camp, which is she has a fabulous book. It's called like How to Train a blank.
Yes.
And then she's got the workbook, I think, called Mustang Camp.
Yep.
So, but great resources for gentling Mustangs if anyone's interested.
Absolutely. And I
Yeah.
love that she broke it down into like a step-by-step
Yeah.
how to train a Mustang. And again, everything's done positively. It's all done through the horse choosing to participate and earning positive reinforcement. I really think she really understands the science.
That's the other thing too. It's like, I think another misconception with positive reinforcement is people think it's just feeding treats, but there's a whole science.
Yeah, it's psychology.
Yeah.
It's psychology 101.
Yeah.
And when I talk about my book, I always tell people my book is a science textbook. This is
Yeah, talk
college
about your
times
book
three.
right now. Yeah.
I'm gonna pimp out my
She's
book.
got a book.
So my book is called Equine Empowerment, and it's a guide to positive reinforcement training. And I talk about the 3 different sciences that go into not just training a horse, but owning and caring for a horse as a whole. So I talk about ethology, and that's the study of who horses are in nature. So that's your Mustangs. That's who are horses without human interference before we mess with them. And that really should be our framework of how we keep our horses. And within reason, if we know that horses budget their time in a specific time budget, well, that's how we should have them budgeting their time in domestication. If they spend 18 hours a day grazing, well, they should be spending 18 hours a day grazing, even if it's not grass, it can be hay, and in our domestic setting. So it's about the care and management. And then I go into the behavioral science. And the behavioral science is where you get the positive negative reinforcement, the positive negative punishment. That's your learning quadrants, your classical and operant conditioning. It's all that science. And really what that is how do you teach a horse a behavior? How do you teach them to do what you want when you want it? And then the last science I go into is neuroscience. And that's the science of emotions. It's how does your brain work, and how does that influence the emotions that you feel throughout your body? And how do we, as horse owners and caretakers, how do we influence that in a good way for our horses?
And tomorrow you're actually doing a seminar. I think you have one on the emotions and one on trauma, right?
So the first one is just an overview of neuroscience and emotions. So that's just what emotions do we know that horses feel? How do they generally display those emotions? And then how do we help that move in a direction that's healthy and appropriate in our domestic setting? And then my second one is on trauma. So that's really my specialty as a trainer, is helping horses that have had an honest trauma, not just a fearful experience, but one that has lingered and affected their mental state and their behavioral state even after the trauma is over. That's really my passion, is helping horses rehab from that.
With that being said, I know you have a rescue, so tell us about what is your rescue? What's the...
Yep, so our rescue, we primarily focus on rescuing draft horses. We try to provide a home for horses that wouldn't typically have a home in a traditional setting. If a horse is adoptable, we try to get them right into an adopted home, and we try not to take them in. We try to take in the ones that wouldn't be adoptable traditionally.
So are you taking them in to keep? Like,
yeah,
so they're
sanctuary.
residential. Okay.
Yeah. And the ones that we take are generally horses with major trauma who will need a positive reinforcement home probably for the rest of their life. While I think most horses can adapt really well to positive, negative, a combination thereof, and you can use positive reinforcement to set them up for a traditional lifestyle, I think horses that have real trauma, going back to the traditional training, can reignite some of that old behavior and old coping mechanisms.
Yeah.
So those horses we try to keep, unless of course we can find them a great positive home, which sometimes happens with our volunteers.
I'd imagine that. So you had mentioned this earlier, but what got you into drafts? The rescue is primarily for draft horses.
Yep, so we're primarily for draft horses. We when I was in college, I went to college for fashion design. Don't ask me why. Clearly not my forte.
Well, clearly you got hooked by something better.
I did.
And you dove all in.
I found a horse carriage company, and I was literally just walking down the street in the city, and the horse carriage had a sign on it that they were hiring. And I was like, this is a chance to work with horses, even though I'm living in the city. And so I started working there. And pretty quickly it was apparent that the horses, even though I was still very traditionally minded, it was very apparent that the horse's needs weren't being met, not emotionally or physically, not in any way. A lot of their needs aren't able to be met in the city because it's a city and they're working on pavement, and it's hard on the body and it's hard on the mind, and it's hard nutritionally where they're not able to graze or consume much hay. So I used all the money that my horse that I had driven had earned over the years, and I bought his freedom, or he bought his own freedom, and took him home. And then the next year, another one came home with us, and it just kind of started happening like that until we became a sanctuary.
Wait, so was that draft horse, was that your first horse?
He was my third horse.
Third, okay.
Actually.
So you had already...
I had just started trickling into positive reinforcement. So I had worked in the city, and I got my own horse, and I had started positive reinforcement. About a year later, I was able to buy him and get him home.
Yeah, neat. I think that is such a sweet story, because it's like such a change from then to now.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
But if you're interested in following Jessica, she's got a book, you've got a podcast, you've got your nonprofit.
Yeah. The book is
how can people
Equine
find
Empowerment, and all of our social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, we're called Empowered Equines. That's the name of our rescue, our website. And our podcast is One Click Pony, and that's me with Janica Kovakoven, and she is the artist who does Fed Up Fred.
And I was thumbing through the book earlier, and I thought it looked really good. It was like really thorough, very educational, so I definitely want to check that out as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I tried to break the science down into these like step-by-step worksheets, try to make it, you know, it's big science, so I wanted to really just pinpoint what the parts that apply to horses.
And it can be overwhelming, like if you're new to positive reinforcement, there's a lot to learn, and
it's like a whole new language.
Yeah, it really is. So, well, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Well, thanks so much.
Anyway, I apologize for the busyness going around. This event has been very busy. This is a slow time, but there's been a lot of distractions going on around, and I think it's about time for this to close up. So.